Hello, everybody. Looks like we might be having a small group today, huh? Well, no worries. I think we'll get this thing rolling, and whoever joins us joins us. Okay. Let me get set up here and we'll begin. All right, we are in week 13. So that means that you guys have the week off next week, which is terrific. So how's everybody coming on their final project? Anybody have any issues?
It's going good for me. It's not that I'm not really having that many issues so far.
Okay, so everything's moving along schedule because we still got like 2 weeks more or less before it's due. So
yes, sir.
Good.
Not related to the final assignment, but related to the assignment that had the issues with the discussion post that wasn't a discussion post.
Oh,
the discussion post version of it still says it's part of an unpublished module and is not available yet.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna like strangle whoever invented web courses.
Section 12.
Your turning point, and then I had the assignment here. So I mean, on my end they both say they're published, so I don't understand.
Were we supposed to submit both, or were we only supposed to submit the discussion?
No, you see, the way what happened was I think I copy and pasted the discussion instructions from another week, and when I did, I didn't notice that web courses toggled back from discussion to assignment. And when it's structured as an assignment, all you can do is submit a document to me or text me something in the submission text box, but you can't respond to any of your classmates. So when somebody alerted me that that was what was happening, you can't in web courses, you can't change an assignment from an assignment to a discussion. It won't let you change the parameter of that. And I think it has to do with the way it integrates with the grade book. So I had to recreate a discussion assignment as a discussion. And then because I noticed that some people had posted some stuff in the assignment section in the speed grader, I was afraid to simply unpublish that so that you wouldn't be able to access that work for any reason. So I left it up, but I sent out an announcement to redirect everybody's attention to the discussion. And if you had already submitted something in the assignment page, to just resubmit it as the discussion so that other people could see it. No one can see what you submit to me in the assignment page tab. I can only see it and you can see it. So in order to get discussion going, I had to recreate a discussion assignment. So you don't have to do both, but what you should do is migrate what you've put here. If you've already responded, migrate what you put here into the discussion so that your peers and colleagues can look at your work.
Can you make sure that the discussion is published properly? Because it's still saying on my end, the topic is part of an unpublished module and is not available yet.
That's odd because I have a green check here that indicates it's published and a green hash mark here, which is like a secondary. And if I open up the turning point discussion, you can see how it says published here.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering have you tried refreshing your browser just to make sure that it's not cookies on your end that aren't adjusting?
I'm pretty sure, but are the instructions the same as the assignment
Yeah,
instructions?
the whole thing is the same. I copied and pasted it into a discussion framework instead of an assignment framework because I can't just change that in web courses. That's a glitchy technicality with this software. So it looks the same. It's the same image, the same instructions, everything. But I extended the due date, I believe. Let's see. Well, Sunday at 11:59. No, I thought I extended the due date to
Yeah, it's listed as the due date is tomorrow.
good. Okay, it should be Wednesday, not Sunday. Yeah, is that at the bottom then? I can't.
But it's still not
Hmm.
like when I sign into web courses, what it's showing. Would you like me to share my screen and show you what I've got?
No, that's all right. Let's try this really quick. I'll unpublish it, and then I'll publish it again. The problem with I just don't want to. If anybody's already done it properly, I don't want to lose their work. But here we go. I'm going to unpublish it, and then I'm going to refresh my my modules page to reflect that change. So, okay, it did it automatically. Unpublished. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in and publish it. So now, and if I go back to the modules page, okay, so it's published. Oh wait, that's not it. Yeah, that's it. Published and published. Okay. And everything else looks good. Here, see, now this is odd. Look at
That's
that.
what it is. Hit that.
So somehow that became unclicked. I wonder if that happened when I unpublished that.
It's working now because mine was saying the same thing Sean did, but once you click that, it brought it up. So it was unpublished until just now.
This happened somewhere when I fixed that then. That's weird. Okay, because you should have been able to see, you couldn't see any of this stuff for week 12?
Correct.
Wow, guys, I wish you would have said something sooner. I mean, because
I was just trying to figure out what, because like I could see the assignment, I just couldn't, like I couldn't figure out what was going on.
yeah, the problem is we only get about, if I'm lucky, I get 1/3 of the total seating from this class to come to the live sessions. So anyone who didn't come to the live sessions and didn't realize there was a problem didn't see any of this or the assignment for week 12. Okay. It's not your fault. You know, I just, if you see a problem like that, you know, you guys can be my additional pairs of eyes and let me know what's wrong, because this software glitches constantly. And it's a never-ending due diligent process for me to make sure that something hasn't unpublished that I didn't mean to be unpublished, or published when I didn't mean for it to be published. That's why I didn't uncheck this. I was afraid that something else would get triggered that I wouldn't catch, and then there would be a problem. So, okay. Well, now hopefully you all can access this okay. And you can see any of the other materials you're going to want to study from all of this. This is all the content from the lecture from last week, or actually from Tuesday. So, and then the video, some additional videos you can watch. So hopefully now you can access everything. If you can't for any reason, please let me know so I can get in there and dig around and attempt to fix what's malfunctioning. Okay. Very helpful. Good feedback. Good to know. Thank you, everybody. Sorry about that. I have no other excuses to offer. Okay, let's forge ahead and look at our last open discussion here, which will be your falling action, your climax, and what they call the denouement. So let me go to my presentation here and talk to you a little bit about that. So I have something to show you here, hopefully in the time frame we have to work with. It's the climactic scene from A Few Good Men. Has anybody not seen the film A Few Good Men? Jack Nicholson, Tom Cruise, Demi Moore.
I have not.
Okay, well, there's probably going to be a spoiler in it for you if you're inclined to watch the movie. But it's a really good example of a climactic event, and it sort of sums up the whole context of the film. Works really well. I have some other examples that we won't go, as in depth in, and maybe that will help you as further examples of what we're talking about today. I would like for you guys to provide a sample of your ending for a discussion this week. Describe in a text format or in a script, so you can either write out what you're thinking about doing or show us what you've done in 2 to 3 pages max. Submit it as a PDF document. So if it's already in script format, just generate a PDF and give us your climactic scene or your resolution. And if you haven't gotten to that point yet, but you know what you want to do, post that as a Word doc. Maybe you would do it that way, and then whoever you choose to comment on can click open your document, read what you're doing, and comment. Okay, and then so each of you should post something initially and then comment on at least one colleague by Sunday. Okay.
So should this denouement be if you're doing a TV series at the end of the first episode or the end of the season?
It depends how you're structuring your final project. So if your final project is the remainder of your pilot script, then yes, give me the denouement of your pilot episode. If you've created a new film for your final project, which is more dramatic and theatrical than television format, give me the wrap up and resolution to your feature idea. And if you've already if you're doing a web structured broadcast format and you already gave me pretty much the whole show in your midterm paper, then give me your final episode perhaps, or a description of what you'll do in your final episode as your resolution for the season. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So is that fairly clear?
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay. Excellent. Then let's continue on here. So, okay, here's a simplified diagram of the 3-act structure. I actually pulled it out of an article that was about the structure of Marvel movies and how they kind of work. And so it shows the 3-act structure, and then it sort of simplifies for us for the sake of our conversation, which is kind of nice. It gives us a really quick glance at inciting incident, rising action, falling action, and denouement. So it kind of gives you in one quick bell curve where these incidents are taking place. So we've discussed all of this already. The world as we see it, how does it change right here? The inciting incident that causes a decision or a plan of action, and then the ascent towards conflict and climax, and then the falling action, which is the aftermath, and then some kind of resolution or wrapping up of the total story and its premise, right? And it starts here with the resolution. So it's a nice quick thing to take a very quick look at, so we get a sense on the map where we're at this point. So we're pretty much here, right? And this lies before us, the resolution, and we are falling from the climax to the point where we get the denouement. So if this was the Lord of the Rings, for instance, the climax would be what? Anyone want to take a stab at it? Pretty simple. Lord of the Rings, the third movie.
The last movie or the first, or?
Yeah, when I say Lord of the Rings, I think I'm thinking about all 3 movies as one story thread. So that means the climax is going to have to happen in the third movie, which is kind of like the third act, right? If you took all three movies and said act 1, act 2, and act 3, you'd kind of have the same structure mapped over the whole thing as a series of films. So in the third movie, the climax for the whole story is...
Okay, so I only ever saw the first one from beginning to end, but for what I remember from the third one is for when they're going up to the mountain about to throw the ring in. Is that it?
Well, at the climax, what happens?
Frodo goes up to the volcano place.
If we got rising action here and falling action here, at the climax, what happens?
The ring is tossed into the fire with Gollum.
Think generally now about any story. At the climax, what's happening here?
The like resolution.
Yeah, just look at the bell curve. What is the climax doing to the bell curve?
It's like the most highest part of the film. So again, I haven't watched this from beginning to end, but I'm just guessing.
Let's just think of this geometrically, right? We got the rising action and the falling action. And right in the middle, at the top of the bell curve, at the peak of the, if you thought of this as an energy curve, right? At the peak of the energy, between the rising action and the falling action, the climax is occurring and it's shifting the energy from ambition to success or failure. I mean, it could mean failure, but usually it's success, right? Try. We've done it. It's happening, right? And then the resolution is going to be the final result here, right? So what you could say is the first movie and the gosh, what do they call it now? It's the group, right, is going out. They have the ring and they're setting off to get advice from Elrond. They're seeking the mentor here, Elrond. In the process, we have conflict, and then the group gets separated. This is a second inciting incident. The group gets separated. Half of the group has to go chase the two hobbits that got captured by the orcs, and the other two set off directly by themselves to Mordor. More build. Second movie, we have orcs attacking, rising action, right? Climax, right? They reach Mordor, they throw the ring in the fire, but that's not the end of the story, right? Because they're now in Mordor, presumably trapped, and we have the final army has gone to the gates of Mordor to confront Sauron directly, because they don't think the hobbits have done what they've just done. They don't know, only we know. Final war, right? And all this is happening, and then what happens? The castle falls apart. The magic is collapsing, and they've won. All the orcs fall into the hole in the ground, and then at the end of the movie, we have the coronation of Aragorn on the top of the ivory fortress at not Asgiliath, but his place, right? And that's sort of the denouement right there, is where the world has been restored to a better place through trial and tribulation. It has changed from what the world was before to the promise of the new world to come. And it starts with the coronation of King Aragorn and promises 1,000 years of peace afterwards, with the death, now the second death of Sauron. So that's kind of how you might look at the breakdown there. Some of you might have a little bit different interpretation if you are, more involved with the story than I am. But that's kind of how I see it happening, is the climax is some kind of shift in the energy from the ambition to the solution. So if you just kind of keep that in mind, and then think about this moment in your own story and how you might have an incident that represents a shift or a turning point in the energy, and then it's either falling in favor of the protagonist or or in favor of the antagonist if your story is a darker story. And it's going to lead to some resolution. So that point's going to happen here. And then you're going to give us a look at what the promise of the new world, or what the new world resembles, or how the world is going to move forward from this moment right here. Okay. So Michael Hogue sort of describes climax and aftermath in these terms. So let me show you that real quick. This is only about a couple of minutes, and see what you think.
Turning point 4, which is at 3/4 of the movie. So we're 3/4 in, the major setback. Talk about that.
Yeah. The hero of the story has been pursuing this visible goal from the beginning of Act 2. Okay, once they have this finish line that they must cross, that your audience and your readers rooting for them to achieve by the end of the story. All the way through, as they pursued this, the obstacles have been getting bigger and bigger. Finally, your hero, at the 3/4 mark, if it's a screenplay, or somewhere around that, if it's a novel, is going to encounter an obstacle they can't overcome. It's going to be something that defeats them, and it must seem to your readers or to your audience like all is lost. Like now, oh my God, there's no way they're going to succeed at achieving this goal. And the hero gives up because their plan is out the window and they have no idea how they're going to achieve the goal now. So if you take a movie like Titanic, what happens is the ship is sinking, and finally it gets so scary and the obstacles are so great when Cal, her jerk of a boyfriend, comes along and says, I found a lifeboat for you. She gets on the lifeboat, even though she knows it means leaving Jack. And we all realize if she leaves Jack, the Leo DiCaprio character, on the ship, and she gets on the lifeboat, all is going to be lost. Okay, so that's the major setback there. Or it's in a recent movie, a really sort of tight thriller called Don't Breathe that came out a few weeks ago before this video was made. It's a very simple thing. They're trying to rob a blind guy of some money, and the blind guy knows they're in his house and have locked him inside. So it's kind of a haunted house movie, but no ghosts. It's just a very intense, closed-in, claustrophobic thriller. And I believe, if I remember it correctly, what happens at the major setback is one of the main characters gets killed by the blind guy, and now there's only one person left, and she has to somehow escape. So it seems like there's no way of getting out of this situation, okay? When that happens, the hero is going to retreat. They're not only going to try and go back to where they were living at the setup, but they're also on the inner journey level going to retreat into their identity. They're going to go back into that protective persona where they were emotionally shut down at the beginning of the story. They're saying to themselves, I knew this was stupid. I knew I never should have gone for this. I shouldn't have opened up. I shouldn't have tried to find true love. I shouldn't have tried to take this emotional risk. You see what happens. If you're writing a love story or romantic comedy, the two lovers must break up at this point. You have to split them apart. And the hero will go back and say, I'm never going to fall in love again. Hitch is a good example of that because the truth comes out. She finds out he's really the date doctor. She assumes, the Eva Mendes character, assumes that Will Smith's character has been lying to her. They break up and he gives up. He says to Albert, I got nothing. It's stupid to fall in love. You can get past it. I'm not going to jump out of a plane without a parachute. And so the character will retreat back into that safe emotional place, but it's not a fulfilling place. That's the rule. They can't have what they want and they can't live a fulfilled, evolved existence if they stay in that identity. And once we have experienced our essence, like these characters have as they move closer to the goal, going back fully into our identity doesn't really cut it anymore because we can't pretend like that's who we truly are. We've actually had the experience in real life and in story form of living a more fulfilled existence. So after that retreat, the hero is going to realize, doesn't matter what it costs, I've got to keep going after what I want. I've got to be that courageous. And then they go into what I call the final push. And that's stage 5 of the 6 stages, where they put everything on the line in order to achieve that outer motivation. They're either going to win or they're going to die trying. And the climax is just the scene which must resolve that question. They either win or they lose. You can't be ambiguous about it. If they win, it means they're fully in their essence. If they aren't fully in their essence, they must lose. And then the final stage is simply what I call the aftermath. It's the after picture, the before and after picture the story creates. The before picture was a hero fully in his identity. The after picture is a hero fully in his or her essence, reaping the rewards of having found the courage to complete that arc.
Okay. I like Michael Hogue. I think he explains things so well. If we go back to my Lord of the Rings analogy, then we've got the ring getting thrown back into the lava inside the mountain. Somewhere over here, the chaps from the Kingdom of Men have decided that the 2 hobbits have probably failed, right? And that Sauron's going to win. So they say, well, let's go out fighting, you know. Stranger things have happened, but we'll probably lose. But I'd rather, you know, die confronting Sauron at his own gates than wait for him to come into our lands and watch the destruction of our world and everything in it. So they lead their army kind of cutting off the tip of this little mountain, and they come over here to what he's describing as your 3/4 point right here, where all is lost. They don't think the hobbits have succeeded in throwing the ring into Mordor's lava. And so they're outside of the gates and they're trying to pick a fight with Sauron, you know? So that's their moment of giving up. And then after, you remember what happens after Smeagol bites Frodo's finger off and falls into the lava, right? The 2 hobbits run, but Frodo can't. So Sam picks him up and carries him out, and they end up on that rock, and the lava starts flowing out of the mountain, and the mountain is erupting because of the clash of magic power that has just sort of ripped the evil intention of this whole place in pieces. And they're on the mountainside on that high piece of stone, and the lava starts flowing all around them. And Frodo's lying in Sam's lap, and Sam is telling him about, you know, giving him scenes of you know, the Hobbiton and the Shire and what, you know, life must be like when this, you know, when you can smell the flowers and the trees and the seasons are changing, and they're like ready to get consumed by lava, right? So we got the 2 story threads now coming together and reweaving themselves together into this all is lost, but oh wait, not really. Because then something happens and the hobbits get rescued, and finally the chain reaction in Mordor finds its way to the front gates where the armies of men have gathered one last time to confront Sauron, and the orcs get destroyed. And that's when we sort of cruise into the ending where, you know, we come to the marriage of Aragorn. So that's basically, you know, the climactic structure. So the culmination of your story, it's really an important point, and, you know, how you use it as a, so as a mechanism of your story structure can mean a lot to the success of your story and the energy and momentum of your story, and as it relates to the audience experience, right? So according to the dictionary, climax is the highest point, the culmination. If we take into account the origin of the word climax from the Greek, which means ladder or staircase, it makes absolute sense. And if you look at the diagram, the ladder or staircase is your rising action leading to the culmination of the struggle or the culmination of the conflict, not the culmination of the story, but the culmination of the major conflict. Okay. And then, so you can think of your screenplay the same way. It's a ladder. It's constantly, it's going up, 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 up. And the protagonists are trying to climb rung by rung. Sometimes they have to slip backwards a time or two. They win some, they lose some, but it's gradually leading towards, this climactic moment. Now, that's pretty much it. There's not much more that can be said about it. I don't think that, is going to add to this conversation, except there's a couple of things I want to talk to you about that can also happen in Climax. But first, let me give you a little bit from Screenwriting Tips. This is a really good website, and see what their point of view on writing your climax should be like.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel for another episode of the Story Structure series by Scriptwriting Tips. In this episode, we will talk about the climax. It's the most expected turning point from the audience, so we're going to explain exactly what it is and how to find it. Stick around, because by the end of this episode, you will know how to write the climax scene in your own stories. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more content by Scriptwriting Tips. So let's get started. The most important turning point in Act 3 is the climax. But what is climax? Let's see first what is the actual meaning of the word. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, climax is the highest point of something, the culmination. If we take into account that the origin of the word climax comes from a Greek word which means ladder or staircase, it makes absolutely sense. So think of your screenplay as a ladder or staircase that your protagonists are trying to climb step by step. Sometimes they might slip back a step or two, but they're always coming back and continue climbing until they reach the top, the highest point of the ladder. And that's the climax in your story. The climax takes place in Act 3, and it's the last major thing that happens in your story. The climax is also called the final culmination, the end game, the great confrontation, the showdown, or the big fight, which is the term I also prefer. So what are the main characteristics of climax? In climax, our interest is at its highest point. This is the scene that everyone expects from the beginning of the story. It is the moment where tension is at its peak, then the conflict has escalated. Here, it's where most of the times the protagonist meets the antagonist and have a clear, blunt confrontation. It's the final fight the protagonist has to give against the antagonist in person. According to the screenwriter David Trottier, the climax is the final face-off between your central character and the opposition. Alternatively, here is the moment where our protagonist faces the biggest obstacle in the story, which it will determine her or his fate. Most of the times, this obstacle is coming from the antagonist. All other characters aren't so important in this scene. Only the protagonist and the antagonist are actually acting here. After this sequence of scenes ends, there is no actual story left to be told. The protagonist either wins or loses. It's the last card that the protagonist has to play, and she or he must play it right. The climax sequence is followed by the results, the resolution, and the epilogue of the story. Let's see now how you can find in a movie where climax is. Here's my method. Step 1. Go to Act 3. Climax is always in Act 3. If you are not in Act 3, it's not or it shouldn't be climax. For those of you that don't remember how to find the beginning of Act 3, I'll just put the link here and down below. Step 2. Find the scene where the protagonist is fighting against the antagonist. There's the climax. In the case of a romantic comedy, that would be the final confrontation between the couple. The climax sequence is where you get to shine as a screenwriter. Here you need to put all your efforts and to write the best scene of your entire screenplay. Up to this point, there has been no scene as intense as this one, the climax scene. Let's see some examples of the big fights. Between a cop and a murderer, the final confrontation usually includes a lot of shooting and car speeding, but in the end of the sequence, one of them loses and the other one wins. If your protagonist is, let's say, a chess player, or a golf player, or a basketball player, then the big fight is usually the final game in which he's usually playing against his greatest opponent. When the greatest opponent is a creature or a nature, then the climax is putting your protagonist against this monster. Just like we can see in Jaws with a shark, or in Jurassic Park with dinosaurs. In a love story, it is usually the final love confession that one makes to the other in order to win her or him back, forever and ever. Because in a romantic comedy, the two lovers are both the protagonist and the antagonist. Here is where one of them opens his or her heart and speaks the truth and expresses all of the emotions he used to fear to express up until now. And after that, he waits for the other person to process all of this and to give an answer. So even when lovers are concerned, we can feel the confrontation between them. We can feel that the stakes are at their highest. We can feel the climax. In a sense, this is also a kind of a big fight between them. That's all about climax for now.
Okay, so that was an interesting little tidbit here. There's one last fellow I'd like to show you. Oh, well, before I do that, I'm going to give you the origins of the word denouement, which I've been using as a substitute for resolution or end game, whatever these other two practitioners have coined. And it's simply a French word that refers to untying the knot. So if your story is a thread that becomes tangled and knotted through conflict, at the end of the story, then when we resolve it, we undo the knot and we restore the smooth line of the narrative, right? So it's in English translates to solving a problem. So I use the word denouement a lot. That was the phrasing and terminology when I was a student. And we've sort of expanded our definitions now. We're expanded our vocabulary a little bit to include some other phrasing. So if you hear me using this word, I'm just substituting it for resolution. Here is Eric Edson. He is another institutional scholar that focuses on narrative and narrative structure. And he's got just a quick tidbit here about denouement and where it happens, what it's good for, and so forth. So let me just show you him real quick.
Two things have to happen in Act 3. Act 3 is the shortest act. If Act 3 is longer than 12 to 15 minutes, you are at risk of losing your audience because they are ready to have it wrapped up. But there are two major things that have to take place in Act 3. The first one is called the obligatory scene, and it says it all in the word obligatory. It has to happen. It's got to be there. And this is why your adversary has to be a human being, and they have to be a very strong human being. Look at Maximus and Commodus. Mano a mano, hand to hand, one will kill the other to decide the dramatic question of the story once and for all. We thought it was going to be decided here, but no, no, no. It is decided once and for all in the obligatory scene, and that's why the adversary has to be a human being, personified as a human being, because they have to go at each other, the hero and adversary, for all the marbles at this point. This decides the issue. And there's one thing more that has to happen after that. It's a quieter moment, but you got to have it. I've seen movies fail because they didn't have this. And that's the denouement. It's the, denouement means what? Untying, unraveling. You have to wrap up all major sub-stories. How it affects all the major players at the very end.
Okay, so he gave us a really kind of cool tidbit there. The obligatory final conflict with the antagonist, and then what everything means. What, this is where we see the premise that was originally offered to the audience as the sort of reason for the precursor to the story itself. We see that reasoning come to its fruition, and we either get it or we don't, right? In that moment, right? If we go back really quickly to that chart again, using the Lord of the Rings analogy, when we're at this point of climax here, we're at the point where the ring, Gollum snatches the ring from Frodo in the last instance. Frodo is knocked backwards and he's hanging, and he's got the ring on his finger and he's thinking, I could just drop into the lava myself, and then Gollum, I guess, snatches him up and pulls the ring off of his finger, and Gollum has the ring. So at this moment, it could go either way. It could fall backwards again. Gollum could get away with the ring, and then this becomes the tragic falling apart of the narrative instead of the culmination of the objective being reached, right? So in this moment too, it helps us define the antagonist from that story thread. So we're kind of told throughout the whole series of movies that the antagonist is Sauron. He's the whole reason why this whole problem has to be fixed, right? And that's the case for the world at large. But in Frodo's case, his direct antagonist is Gollum. And that's even defined as such in the very first movie, in the when they've set out and the group is trapped in Moria and they have to go through the mountain to get out the other side. And Frodo is expressing to Gandalf that he doesn't want to be in that situation. He wishes that it never happened, and that he could just be back in the Shire and everything could be back the way it was. And then he realizes that the group has been followed by the creature Gollum. And that's where Gandalf admits that he has been watching Gollum for the better part of the last couple of days, as he has silently crept along behind the group, keeping an eye on them and tracking them and so forth. And Gandalf in that moment admits that it was fortuitous that Bilbo didn't kill him, because Frodo says, I wish that Bilbo had killed that pathetic creature when he had the chance back, in the old story. And Gandalf says, I'm not sure that would have been the best thing for everybody. We don't yet know the full role that Gollum has to play. And so in that moment, I think it's when you realize that, okay, so Gollum is the antithesis of Frodo, because Bilbo kind of let him go. He was Bilbo's antithesis, and then Bilbo let him go. And Bilbo faced his real antithesis, which was Smaug in the first book. In The Lord of the Rings, Gollum becomes the new antagonist for Frodo. Sauron then, so you say, well, Sauron is the threat to the entire world. Well, yeah, but his embodiment is a direct threat to a different character, to Aragorn. Aragorn is the heir to the throne of Gondor, the kingdom of men, and it is partly incited by the repair of the sword that was broken when Aragorn's predecessor, the sword is called Elendil. His predecessor takes Elendil and cuts the finger off of Sauron and takes the ring for himself. When he seizes upon the ring, Sauron is then temporarily defeated, right? And the kingdoms of men and elves and everybody kind of go back to life as normal. But instead of throwing the ring into the fire in Mordor the way he was supposed to, Aragorn's great grandfather keeps the ring, and that's what dooms the world to experience this problem again. And so as a descendant, Aragorn becomes the protagonist, and the antagonist for Aragorn is the latest manifestation of Sauron. So those two have to meet and resolve their differences, as just like Frodo has to meet with Gollum and resolve those differences. So it's kind of interesting how it kind of helps you understand how those two threads have really their own structures, and then they kind of weave between the two, and then they culminate at the end, and everything gets wrapped up at the same moment very tidily in this in this 3/4 moment here that Michael Hogue talks about, the do or die moment, the moment of fruition, right? So we've got all of this discussion of climax, resolution, denouement, and wrapping it up. But in the process of thinking about all of this, I also decided to also give you 3 other situations that could affect the way your climax and resolution work. And it has to do with how you've structured your story up to that point, and some things that you may have either done well or overlooked, and they affect how well your ending is crafted, how well it works with your audience, and so forth. The first situation, before I do that, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me show you how the film A Few Good Men fits into all of these definitions and descriptions of climax and denouement. Let me show you first the trailer for A Few Good Men, and this will help. Was it Jamaica that hadn't seen it? A Few Good Men. The trailer should help you, give you a little bit sense of what the story is, and then I'll show you 2 brief clips. So here we go. So here is the trailer for A Few Good Men.
You ever served in an infantry unit, son?
No, sir.
Ever served in a forward area?
No, sir.
Ever put your life in another man's hands, asked him to put his life in yours?
No, sir.
We follow orders, son. We follow orders or people die. It's that simple. Are we clear?
Yes, sir.
Are we clear?
Crystal.
All those having business with this General Court Martial, stand forward and you shall be heard.
Facts of the case are these. On midnight of September 6th, the accused entered the barracks room with their platoon mate. They woke him up, tied his arms and legs with tape, forced a rag into his throat. A few minutes later, a chemical reaction caused his lungs to begin bleeding. He drowned in his own blood and was pronounced dead at 37 minutes past midnight.
You think Santiago was murdered?
Private Santiago is dead, and that is a tragedy. But he is dead because he had no code. He is dead because he had no honor. And God was watching.
How do you feel about that theory?
Sounds good to me.
I'll knock it all down to involuntary manslaughter.
No deal. We're going to court.
No, you're not.
Why not?
Because you'll lose. You want to investigate me? Roll the dice and take your chances. I eat breakfast 300 yards from 4,000 Cubans who are trained to kill me. So don't think for 1 second you can come down here, flash a badge, and make me nervous.
Your men follow orders and people die.
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth. Son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns. Who's gonna do it? You?
But if this case is handled in the same fast food, slick-ass, Persian bazaar manner with which you seem to handle everything else, then something's gonna get missed.
In the heart of the nation's capital, in a courthouse of the United States government, one man will stop at nothing to keep his honor, and one will stop at nothing to find the truth.
Okay. Well, one of the
I will
final
say I
directors.
didn't know. Yeah.
Pardon me?
I
Go
will
ahead.
say I didn't know that quote came from that movie. You can't handle the truth. I had no idea where that quote came from.
Really? Oh, well, that's terrific because now you can watch the movie and see the roots of that phrase and understand. It's a really good story. It's military intrigue, and oddly enough, Rob Reiner directed this, who is really known for his comedy. I mean, Rob Reiner, who directed The Princess Bride, and Rob Reiner of All in the Family fame. He played Meathead for several years on that terrific TV show. And so he turns all of his expert timing and passion and performance into a topic that's really kind of dark, right? Jack Nicholson is he is the commandant of the Guantanamo Bay military base in Cuba, and there is under his command there is a young soldier who is not happy at his position, at his post. He's not really happy with his role. He's conflicting with his peers and colleagues. They have decided to, for lack of a better term, excommunicate him. In other words, he becomes persona non grata. They've got an axe to grind against him because he doesn't fit in. And so then there is a situation where either by direct order or by inference, his fellow soldiers go into the barracks at night and they effect a disciplinary measure that is typically, in other words, it's punishment from within the group, not punishment from outside, from a different authority having jurisdiction over this particular military unit. The military unit takes matters into their own hands and they decide they're going to discipline this young soldier. And it has tragic consequences. The young man dies, right? And so enter the JAG Corps from the U.S. Navy, the judicial unit of the armed services, and they are going to bring a case to court and hold the commandant accountable. Right? They always say, if a problem stems from your department, then the department head bears the responsibility. So they're bringing a case against Jack Nicholson's character for the death of this young soldier. So then we have Tom Cruise's character, who is kind of similar to the young man who dies of the Code Red procedure. He's a young attorney in the JAG Corps. His father was a very famous attorney in the same unit. And so kind of like his character Maverick in Top Gun, Tom Cruise's character is once again living in the shadow of an iconic father and trying very hard to establish his own identity. But instead of being, accepting that challenge and rising to the occasion, he's giving into it, and he is therefore self-destructive and a little bit self-deprecating, and he's self-medicating, and he's not serious. He doesn't take anything seriously. And of course, he's partnered with another officer who is female in the JAG Corps, and she has her own issues, namely being in the military as an officer and a female in a world where the men seem content to marginalize her role. She has her own axes to grind, and the two of them get stuck together as the team that's going to litigate this problem and go after Jack Nicholson, but it's looked upon as a sham or a kangaroo court because of the ethos of Jack Nicholson, right? He's this amazing commander of this mythological, this famous legendary base in Cuba that is, the topic of a lot of conjecture. And they don't think they're going to pull it off. And Kevin Bacon basically illustrates that point in the narrative, right? In between these two characters is Kevin Pollak, who is like, he's the fool, if you will, in the archetypal structure. He's the comic relief in some ways. He's the one element that sort of glues these two kinetic characters together. And so we sort of find everybody's wound, right? Bacon is condemned to follow the institutional structures and not deviate. Even though he sees wrong being committed, he can't stand out and speak against it. Kevin Pollak, nobody takes him seriously. Demi Moore has everything to prove as a woman that she's as good as a man. And he is trying to say, I can't fight against the legend of my father. I'm trying to be my own man, but nobody wants to accept me on my own terms. Those are all the wounds that are going around. And the only guy that doesn't seem to have a wound apparently is Jack Nicholson. But we find out at some point that Nicholson's inner wound is vanity, right? He takes himself far too seriously. So let's see how we come to a culminating moment, right? And it's one scene, but it's broken in half because I want to get your thoughts on the first part of it before I show you the resolution. But here is the buildup in the climax to. It kind of happens in two sessions in the courtroom. So they have a day of questioning back and forth, and Tom Cruise is losing his confidence because he doesn't feel like he's chipping away at Jack Nicholson sufficiently to get Nicholson to implicate himself. And so he's losing confidence. The whole legal team from JAG is losing confidence. Even Kevin Pollak is counseling Cruise to throw in the towel and avoid his own court-martial for bringing these what would you call them, frivolous charges against an acting officer and so forth, all of the odd sort of protocols they have in the armed services. And so it's a very interesting point in the story. So let me show you what's going on here, and then we can just quickly think about that before I show you the resolution.
Lieutenant, call your witness.
Defense calls Colonel Nathan Jessup.
Colonel Jessup, would you raise your right hand, please, sir? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give in this general court-martial will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Would you have a seat, please, sir? Would you state your name, rank, and current billet for the record, please, sir?
Colonel Nathan R. Jessup, Commanding Officer, Marine Ground Forces, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba.
Thank you, sir.
He's not here. Colonel, when you learned of Santiago's letter to the NIS, you had a meeting with your two senior officers. Is that right?
Yes.
The platoon commander, Lieutenant Jonathan Kendrick, and the executive officer, Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Markinson.
Yes.
And at present, Colonel Markinson is dead. Is that right?
Objection. I'd like to know just what the defense counsel is implying.
I'm implying simply that at present, Colonel Markinson is not alive.
Surely Colonel Jessup doesn't need to appear in this courtroom to confirm that information.
I just wasn't sure if the witness is aware that 2 days ago the colonel took his own life with a .45 caliber pistol.
The witness is aware, the court is aware, and now the court members are aware. We thank you for bringing this to our attention. Move on, Lieutenant.
Yes, sir. Colonel, at the time of this meeting, you gave Lieutenant Kendrick an order. Is that right?
I told Kendrick to tell his men that Santiago wasn't to be touched.
And did you give an order to Colonel Markinson as well?
I ordered Markinson to have Santiago transferred off the base immediately.
Why?
I felt his life might be in danger once word of the letter got out.
Grave danger?
Is there another kind?
Colonel, we have the transfer order. You and Colonel Markinson co-signed ordering that Santiago be on a flight leaving Guantanamo at 6 the next morning. Was that the first flight off the base?
The 0600 was the first flight off the base.
Well, you flew up to Washington early this morning, is that right?
Yes.
I noticed you're wearing your Class A dress uniform for your appearance in court today.
As are you, Lieutenant.
Did you wear that uniform on the plane?
Please, the court, is this dialogue relevant to anything in
The defense
particular?
didn't have an opportunity to depose this witness, Your Honor. I'd ask the court for a little latitude.
A very little latitude.
Colonel?
I wore utilities on the plane.
You brought your dress uniform with you?
Yes.
Toothbrush, shaving kit, change of underwear.
Your Honor!
Is the colonel's underwear a matter of national security?
Gentlemen, you better get somewhere fast with this, Lieutenant.
Yes, sir. Colonel?
I brought a change of clothes and some personal items.
Thank you. After Dawson and Downey's arrest on the night of the 6th, Santiago's barracks room was sealed off and its contents inventoried. 4 pairs of camouflage pants, 3 long-sleeve khaki shirts, 3 pairs of boots, 4 pairs green socks, 3 OD green t-shirts.
Please,
2
the court,
belts.
is there a question anywhere in our future?
Lieutenant Caffey, I have to ask you to state your question.
I'm wondering why Santiago wasn't packed. Tell you what, we'll get back to that one in a minute. This is a record of all telephone calls made from your base in the past 24 hours. After being subpoenaed to Washington, you made 3 calls and highlighted those calls in yellow. Do you recognize those numbers, sir?
I called Colonel Fitzhughes in Quantico, Virginia. I wanted to let him know that I would be in town. The second call was to arrange a meeting with Congressman Richmond of the House Armed Services Committee. And the third call was to my sister, Elizabeth.
Why did you make that call, sir?
I thought she might like to have dinner tonight.
Your Honor.
I'm going to put a stop to this.
Your Honor, these are the telephone records from Gitmo for September 6th. And these are 14 letters that Santiago wrote in 9 months, requesting, in fact, begging for a transfer. Upon hearing the news that he was finally getting his transfer, Santiago was so excited that do you know how many people he called? 0. Nobody. Not one call to his parents saying he was coming home. Not one call to a friend saying, can you pick me up at the airport? He was asleep in his bed at midnight. And according to you, he was getting on a plane in 6 hours. Yet everything he owned was hanging neatly in his closet and folded neatly in his footlocker. You were leaving for 1 day. You packed a bag and made 3 phone calls. Santiago was leaving for the rest of his life. And he hadn't called a soul. And he hadn't packed a thing. Can you explain that? The fact is, there was no transfer order. Santiago wasn't going anywhere. Isn't that right, Colonel?
Objection, Your Honor. It's obvious that Lieutenant Caffey's intention this afternoon is to smear a high-ranking Marine officer in the desperate hope that the mere appearance of impropriety will win him points with the court members. Now, it's my recommendation, sir, that Lieutenant Caffey be reprimanded for his conduct and the witness be excused with the court's deepest apologies.
Overruled.
Your Honor.
The objection is noted.
Colonel? Is this funny, sir?
No, it's not. It's tragic.
Do you have an answer?
Absolutely. My answer is I don't have the first damn clue. Maybe he was an early riser and liked to pack in the morning. And maybe he didn't have any friends. I'm an educated man, but I'm afraid I can't speak intelligently about the travel habits of William Santiago. What I do know is that he was set to leave the base at 0600. Now, are these really the questions that I was called here to answer? Phone calls and footlockers? Please tell me that you have something more, Lieutenant. These two Marines are on trial for their lives. Please tell me that their lawyer hasn't pinned their hopes to a phone bill. Do you have any other questions for me, Counselor?
Lieutenant Kathy. Lieutenant, do you have anything further for this witness?
Thanks, Danny. I love Washington.
Excuse me. I didn't dismiss you.
I beg your pardon?
I'm not through with my examination. Sit down.
Colonel.
What's that?
I'd appreciate if he would address me as Colonel or Sir. I believe I've earned it.
Defense counsel will address the witness as Colonel or Sir.
I don't know what the hell kind of unit you're running here.
And the witness will address this court as Judge or Your Honor. I'm quite certain I've earned it. Take your seat, Colonel.
Okay. Can you feel the pot boiling?
Yes, sir.
So do you recognize some key moments in this exchange? And if we think about the our little story structure, our quick cheat sheet here, it's a rising action. We're getting to a point here where there's a couple of things happening that we've spoken about in prior classes. Does anybody remember what those moments might be in the hero's journey structure, for instance? Anyone?
Is it the point of no not the point of no return, it's the other one. Is it like when you're the one before the elixir?
Well, here the elixir is down here, right? That's the return with sacred knowledge or wisdom or artifact victory. But over here, you could call it the final push, maybe. You could call it it's the point where your hero has to recommit, right? Do you see how he has a moment of indecision? He's standing there and what he thought was going to be his cleverest line of questioning has kind of bounced off the general or the colonel's armor, right? He is he's taken a poke, and David has taken a poke and Goliath hasn't flinched, right? So he has to recommit to whether or not he wants to go all the way with the penultimate question, which is he's going to ask him directly if the colonel ordered his men to conduct the code red disciplinary action on Santiago, right? But you can see Kevin Pollak going, no, don't do it, and Demi Moore has kind of lost confidence in their objective, and she's not really wanting to move further. And Kevin Bacon really gives us the most interesting expository dialogue, which is he tells us what's at stake for Tom Cruise's character if Tom Cruise pursues this line of questioning against the colonel and his ethos. And even the judge is sort of hiding behind the institutional protocols. Even the judge is wary that Tom Cruise might overstep his bounds of propriety as as a prosecutorial lawyer and tread dangerously onto the grounds that will lead him to his own court-martial, right? So it's like the final press, and then it's the decision to recommit, and it's leading, it's all kind of stacking up right here. It's following a very steep power curve at this point. It's not a one-to-one gradual incline like might be resembling this bell curve, but more a really steep power curve that's ramping rapidly up towards the climax, right? In this last court scene. So there's going to be a moment, and there's going to be a turning point right here. And it's going to be pretty much a specific question, and it's going to land obtusely in Nicholson's lap. And then we're going to get the whole moment's going to open up for us. But did you notice anything interesting about the scene? Did you see any other resonant themes that were going on there? I kind of leaked one for you already in my commentary. Did you see anything in that courtroom that resonated with you on a thematic level? So I mentioned David and Goliath, right? If you look at everybody's tossed salad, right, on their dress uniforms, right? That's the campaign ribbons that they have on their uniform. And you look around the room. I mean, of course, Colonel Jessup is, massively decorated veteran, right? His whole tunic is covered on the left side with the banners of his exploit, right? The judge has a decent collection of ribbons himself on his dress uniform. Even Kevin Bacon has a variety of campaign badges on his chest. Demi Moore has more than Tom Cruise, and so does Kevin Pollak. If you look at Tom Cruise, he's got like one little campaign banner on his jacket, right? It's probably the one he got when he graduated from boot camp, right? Or when he graduated from law school, maybe. And everybody else has more symbolic accolades. It's almost like the endorsement stickers on a NASCAR, right? Everybody else is boasting more ethos than Tom Cruise. And so he really is, in a sense, the David character, and then Goliath, just up with all of his, nonverbal experience pinned to his chest, right? It really is the underdog versus, the status quo, the Marine Corps writ large, and everything that it professes to stand for. So it's a climactic moment in that sense, right? It's the underdog versus the archetype. Anything else? And did anybody else pick up on anything like that? Did anybody pick up on the David Goliath theme?
Not so much as that, but when I was seeing this scene, it did make me think of the Legally Blonde movie, of when everyone's doubting you, and then right when you think you're about to lose, they're about to come out with something that lets them win. Right.
My whole life I've been judged as a certain kind of person because of my blonde hair and my open and expressive joy with life, right? And everybody thinks they see me a certain way. It's a lot like her defending herself against the indictments of society, which looks at her as the dumb blonde, and she's really not. And in that final moment, we see the Phoenix, right? The new character who has overcome their obstacles and risen out of the flames of their previous existence and become this other figure. So yeah, really, it's interesting how we have these other resonant themes that are going on that they're helping to enhance the scene, and they're giving us some interesting reinforcements for the tone that we're setting here in the classroom. We've got the life and death struggle, because the two masterminds behind the Code Red that got Santiago killed. Those are the two Marines that are on trial, and the stakes for them are very high. They will be court-martialed and executed for the crime that they committed. And so there is a life and death struggle for those two men that are sitting there as the defendants in that case. Everybody else is kind of hiding behind the institutional bias and the giving credit to the ideology and the structures of society, as opposed to looking at the specific details and trying to interpret what the truth might be hidden to our view. So a lot of interesting things are going on. So here then is here is the climax.
A moment ago, you said that you ordered Lieutenant Kendrick to tell his men that Santiago wasn't to be touched.
That's right.
And Lieutenant Kendrick was clear on what you wanted?
Crystal.
Any chance Lieutenant Kendrick ignored the order?
Ignored the order?
Any chance he forgot about it?
No.
Any chance Lieutenant Kendrick left your office and said, the old man is wrong?
No.
When Lieutenant Kendrick spoke to the platoon and ordered them not to touch Santiago, any chance they ignored him?
You ever served in an infantry unit, son?
No, sir.
Ever served in a forward area?
No, sir.
Ever put your life in another man's hands? Asked him to put his life in yours?
No, sir.
We follow orders, son. We follow orders or people die. It's that simple. Are we clear?
Yes, sir.
Are we clear?
Crystal. Colonel, I have just one more question before I call Airman O'Malley and Airman Rodriguez. If you gave an order that Santiago wasn't to be touched, and your orders are always followed, then why would Santiago be in danger? Why would it be necessary to transfer him off the base?
Santiago was a substandard Marine. He was being transferred.
That's not what you said. You said he was being transferred because he was in grave danger.
That's correct.
You said he was in danger. I said grave danger. You said, is there
I
any
recall
other...
what I said.
I can have the court reporter read back to you.
I know what I said. I don't have to have it read back to me like I'm...
Why the two orders? Colonel?
Sometimes men take matters into their own hands.
No, sir. You made it clear just a moment ago that your men never take matters in their own hands. Your men follow orders or people die. So Santiago shouldn't have been in any danger at all, should he have, Colonel?
You snotty little bastard.
Your Honor, I'd like to ask for a recess.
I'd like an answer to the question, Judge.
The court will wait for an answer.
If Lieutenant Kendrick gave an order that Santiago wasn't to be touched, then why did he have to be transferred? Colonel? Lieutenant Kendrick ordered the Code Red, didn't he? Because that's what you told Lieutenant Kendrick to do.
Object!
And when it went bad, you cut these guys loose!
Your Honor!
You had markets inside a phony transfer!
Your Honor!
You doctored the logbook!
Damn, Captain!
You coerced the doc!
Consider yourself in contempt.
Colonel Jessup, did you order the Code Red?
You don't have to answer that question.
I'll answer the question. You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth. Son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns. Who's gonna do it? You? You, Lieutenant Weinberg? I have a greater responsibility than you can possibly fathom. You weep for Santiago and you curse the Marines. You have that luxury. You have the luxury of not knowing what I know, that Santiago's death, while tragic, probably saved lives. And my existence, while grotesque and incomprehensible to you, saves lives. You don't want the truth because deep down in places you don't talk about at parties, you want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. We use words like honor, code, loyalty. We use these words as the backbone of a life spent defending something. You use them as a punchline. I have neither the time nor the inclination to explain myself to a man who rises and sleeps under the blanket of the very freedom that I provide, and then questions the manner in which I provide it. I would rather you just said thank you and went on your way. Otherwise, I suggest you pick up a weapon and stand a post. Either way, I don't give a damn what you think you are entitled to.
Did you order the code red?
I did the job.
Did you order the code red?
You're goddamn right I did!
Please, the court, I suggest the members be dismissed so that we can move to an immediate Article 39A session. The witness has rights.
Captain Ross.
Jack?
The members of the court will retire to an anteroom until further instructed.
All rise.
What the hell is this? Colonel, what's going on? I did my job. I do it again. I'm gonna get on a plane and go on back to my base.
You're not going anywhere, Colonel. MPs, guard the Colonel.
Yes, sir.
Captain Ross.
What the hell is
Colonel
this?
Jessup, you have the right to remain silent. Any statement
I'm being charged with a crime.
Trial by court martial.
Is that what this is?
Or administrative.
I'm being charged with a
You
crime?
have the right to consult with a lawyer prior to any further
This
questioning.
is funny.
This lawyer may be a civilian
That's what
lawyer
this
appointed by
is.
you at
This
your own
is-
expense.
I'm gonna rip the eyes out of your head and piss in your dead skull. You fucked with the wrong Marine.
Colonel Jessup, do you understand these rights as I've just read them to you?
You fucking people. You have no idea how to defend a nation. All you did was weaken a country today, Caffey. That's all you did. You put people's lives in danger. Sweet dreams, son.
Don't call me son. I'm a lawyer and an officer in the United States Navy. And you're under arrest, you son of a bitch. The witness is excused.
And that, my friends, is Aaron Sorkin, the writer. So we have a powerful expose of abuse of power, David and Goliath, overcoming personal wounds, indignation, feeling sorry for yourself, rising to the occasion, right? All of these interesting themes are wrapped up into this very compelling narrative. And so there you have it, Jamaica. There is the source of the expression that you have heard so many times and didn't know where the origins were. You can thank Mr. Sorkin for that, and Mr. Reiner and Mr. Nicholson for a very compelling performance. Just really quickly, I wanted to talk to you about I had a similar thing set up for planes, trains, and automobiles. Very interesting. It's a little different kind of a climax at this point, but I'm running out of time. What I really wanted to bring to your attention were three concepts that can affect this sort of climax, falling action resolution. In the affirmative, we have something called Chekhov's gun, okay? Illustrated in this video that I've put on web courses for you from Studio Binder, which is a really great explanation of the Chekhov's gun concept against the backdrop of Knives Out, film that came out year before last, and it has Daniel Craig, James Bond, starring as the inspector. But Chekhov's gun is basically a principle that describes a way that you reveal your story structure and your resolution with little clues along the way, like breadcrumbs for the audience to follow. And Chekhov's gun is basically a dramatic principle which states that if you show a gun, or if the audience sees a gun in the first act, it should be used somewhere between the second and third act in the story, following the traditional 3-act structure. The inverse is also true. If a gun is fired in the third act, then it should have been established earlier on. And it's through this kind of sort of titular action that we contrive the theme of Chekhov's gun principle, and we can apply it to a story. So Chekhov was a famous Russian author, and he kind of came up with this principle that basically any little story tidbits that you give to the audience should be done for a purpose, and they shouldn't just be there to fill the pages, fill the time, or to distract the audience from the theme of your story, the point you're making, the action that reinforces that point, and leading to the premise, right? Every element within a piece of writing should contribute directly to the whole story. Okay. So Chekhov came up with these three little sort of rules to live by, which is, well, not three, but if something is set up, then it must be paid off, and vice versa. And a setup without a payoff is a waste of time. We sometimes refer to that as a MacGuffin. Okay. In situations like screenplays, Chekhov's gun can be illustrated, I think, fairly clearly in The Wrath of Khan, if you're familiar with that film. In the beginning of the movie, there's a switching over of, I think she was science officer, and so Captain Kirk meets Lieutenant Savick at Starfleet, and he comments on her successful grades on a test given to all cadets before they graduate called Kobayashi Maru, where they are faced with a no-win situation, and then the way you respond to the situation, how you handle it, allegedly helps define your character as an officer, right? So we're introduced to the Kobayashi Maru as a concept within the Star Trek framework. It's a test that analyzes and judges the character and fiber of a commanding officer. And then Savick acknowledges that she sort of based her own performance on the same performance that Captain Kirk gave when he took the Kobayashi Maru when he was a candidate in officer training in Starfleet. And so it becomes sort of the basis for an underlying theme within the story of The Wrath of Khan, which is, how does the hero react to a situation where he knows that he probably can't win? Does he still go forward with his integrity, with his objectivity, and with his honor intact, or does he turn and run from the conflict, right? And it finds itself over and over again recurring in this story until the ultimate climax of the film, where we learn that there's one aspect of the Kobayashi Maru test that nobody took into account, and that was the possibility that someone might be inclined to cheat in order to sway the results of the test in their favor. And at the end of, towards the end of the film, when we think all is lost and Kirk is trapped on the planet with some other characters from the Enterprise, and they all think that they're about to die, Kirk whips out his communicator and says, "Are we ready to go?" And the response from the Enterprise is yes. He says, "Beam us up." And then we realize at that moment that Kirk is still cheating. He cheated to get out of Starfleet on the exam, and he's been cheating death ever since by always swaying the odds in his own favor. So it's kind of like Chekhov's gun, I think, sort of framed very nicely into the universe of Star Trek. The opposite of that would be the MacGuffin, which is an object or a goal that is thrust upon everybody in the film, the protagonist and possibly the antagonist, and other subsequent characters. They're all kind of hunting for the same thing, but that thing that they are trying to find, achieve, acquire, doesn't actually contribute to the story as a whole. in any real significant way. And when I kind of racked my brain about it, the one thing that I could come up with, and you may or may not agree, and I'd be interested in hearing your argument, would be the heart of the ocean from the movie Titanic. So the heart of the ocean was a diamond that was given to Rose as a betrothal gift by her boyfriend and Billy Zane. And so it becomes this thing. It's the thing that drew Bill Paxton into the story because he is conducting the search on the research vessel. And so it gives us a point to check in and check out of the Titanic narrative to modern day to see whether or not Bill Paxton is going to, go down in a submarine and find this ultra expensive, valuable jewel. And in the end, it doesn't really contribute to the story significantly. The story is still a love story between Rose and Jack. The Titanic still sinks. None of that changes. It doesn't stop, the finding of the diamond doesn't stop Jack from dying in the end of the movie. The heart of the ocean doesn't stop Rose from surviving or trying to survive. The heart of the ocean doesn't reunite Rose with Billy Zane. None of the things that the heart of the ocean represented seem to have any bearing on the final solution of Titanic. So in this case, then you might say that the heart of the ocean diamond in that movie is a MacGuffin. In other words, everybody wants it at some point in the movie. They're all looking for it. It's missing. It's very valuable. Who had it? Jack stole it. No, I didn't. Then they lock him up, and that doesn't seem to resolve anything. And in the process, they still have to get off the boat. The boat is still sinking, and it's kind of a story point that gets lost. And then Bill Paxton's role becomes sort of secondary to the overarching concern, which is what will happen to the love between Jack and Rose. And does this mean the boat's not going to sink? No, that's impossible. It actually sank in reality. So it becomes this odd story point that many critics debate the validity of and say, well, did we really need that in order to tell this story? So I'd be interested in knowing your comments on that. So we have something that leads us by breadcrumbs through the story and reinforces our premise. The opposite would be something that doesn't help reinforce our premise at all, doesn't really help us wrap up our story at all. And then there is the third option, which is a lot like the Captain Kirk option, which is cheating, but not on the part of the characters, on the part of the author. And that is the Deus Ex Machina. So in the Deus Ex Machina, the literal translation was a machine that dropped the God character into the Greek play to resolve the ending of every dramatic play in Greek mythology, because the gods were always responsible for the benefit and the advancement and the flourishment of man. And so the gods were credited with, given the benefit of the doubt that everything good that happens is as the result of the gods. And so when the characters get too deep into a problem that they can't solve on their own, the gods swoop in at the last minute and save the day, right? So it means the machine that transported the gods, okay, Deus Ex Machina, and it's now become a colloquial phrase that we use when the author uses some kind of mechanism or tool at their disposal at the very end of the movie to wrap up cleanly something that they kind of wrote into a corner, by mistake, right? Some people might say, I found an interesting argument online that somebody said the time medallion that was given to Hermione and Harry Potter was Deus Ex Machina because it really didn't play a significant role in the story until the very end. It saved everybody's lives and was very convenient that she had it in the first place, but nobody ever really understood why she was given that medallion at all. And then at the end of the movie, it saves everybody's lives conveniently, right? There was some compelling arguments for and against that, so I decided to abandon that. And from my own experience, and I love to use the Lord of the Rings because I think it fits in so well with a lot of these concepts, so I decided that it's possible that the eagles at the end of the Lord of the Rings who come to save Frodo was actually a Deus Ex Machina on the part of Tolkien. And a lot of people in my research agreed with that notion. And that's because it took Frodo and Sam like a movie and a half to get into Mordor, throw the ring into Mount Doom, and then realize that their cause was a one-way trip all along. And this is happening at like the 2/3 mark in the third movie of the Lord of the Rings. It's like, okay, these guys are going to die. That's kind of a bummer, right? We've invested in them. We've followed their exploits the whole way. They actually succeeded in destroying the ring like they were supposed to. And for all of that effort, they're still going to die. What a ripoff, right? And so when when you sample an audience and you give them that kind of antithetical ending, and you get bad feedback, it's like, what am I going to do? He's like, oh yeah, you know what I'll do? I'll have Gandalf send the Eagles to pick him up, and then the Eagles will get there in like no time, find Frodo on the rock amongst all the lava and explosions and the Mount Doom falling to pieces, and they'll bring Frodo back in record time, and it won't take us a whole nother movie just to resolve the story in the first place. And so that is a common theme in a lot of the criticisms of the Tolkien story structure. And the Eagles are considered in many respects a Deus Ex Machina for that very reason. And I've actually realized that I have misspelled Deus. It should be EU. I'm sorry. It should be Deus Ex Machina. Okay. So those are three possible problems that you could have with a narrative if you're not being careful, right? Have you given little isolated instances all along to clue your audience into what the final conflict and resolution might be, or what the objectives are? Or are you working against yourself by chasing a story point that's going to end up not contributing effectively or efficiently to your narrative? If so, you should head it off at the pass and don't let it become a heart of the ocean. And don't cheat either. Don't use a Deus Ex Machina to clean up the mess of your story that really was structured weakly, and go back and see if you can figure out a way to weave the threads together a little more tightly to where the performance, the dialogue, the premise, and the conflicts all kind of line up and march the audience smoothly through the narrative towards the end of the film. Okay. So these are the three conditions I wanted to bring to your attention. And I could only really do it at the end of the discussions about all the things we talked about, structure and objectives and themes and premise and all of those things. And then simply warn you, these are the pitfalls, right? Chekhov's gun is the ideal sort of scenario, and then try to avoid at all costs the Macguffin and the Deus Ex Machina. The only argument in favor of the Macguffin that I have heard was that if you are writing a story that seems to be on the nose and there's fairly little beneath the surface that will confuse or misdirect the audience, if you're looking for a way to sort of deliberately have the audience looking one way when they should have looked the other way, sometimes a Macguffin will fulfill that need for you. But the opposite argument is, why resort to a cheap mechanical solution when you can actually seed the themes and the tone of your film all along the way and give the audience a little bit more to discover as they work in the rising action towards your climactic resolution, right? So that's really it. So we've discussed all of this. I've got a couple of videos for you to look at on web courses, and you've got a small amount to read in the Screenwriter's Bible, and I've given you a couple of PDFs about those last three story structure imperatives, right? Your assignment for the week would be the discussion post where you offer your falling action climax resolution segment either in a scripted form or in a text explaining what's going on, and then respond to a peer. And for our workshop on Thursday, then, if you have this ready to go and you want to discuss that in the workshop, I welcome that possibility. I would also welcome your conversations about the three pitfalls, right? Do you have an example of a film perhaps that illustrates a Deus Ex Machina very well, or a film that shows us definitively a Macguffin? And what would that film be? And tell us where the item can be seen and what the situation is involving that element. Any one of those conversations I think would be fun to have on Thursday. And then next week, of course, is your spring break. So this is kind of our last opportunity at a really good workshop. So think about those things for Thursday. And I will just ask you briefly if anybody has any questions or comments about this. Sorry, I couldn't show you the trains, planes, automobiles. I ran out of time, but does anybody have any reflection or questions about today's discussion?
No, sir.
It's self-explanatory.
Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed putting it together. And I will release you. Thank you for your time and attention. I'll have this lecture posted here pretty shortly, and I'll see you all on Thursday. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.